I'm reeling. I'm reeling. I finished everything about half an hour ago. I'm in shock. To calm down, I tried watching The Secret Life of Mormon Wives while I was getting ready, and that also did not help me calm down. So
I'm shocked you have not watched the whole thing by now. And yes, also the reading, but I just got excited because I didn't know you were watching that. But
uh, I mean, you can't love reality TV and not. Also, the amount they drink Diet Coke inspired me to get a little Diet Coke. Oh,
that's pretty funny, actually. Uh,
uh,
um,
okay.
yeah, but this
Can't talk
week,
about that
crazy, crazy stuff. I finished it about 2 days ago and was going to text you, and I'm like, Callie probably hasn't finished yet, and I should save it. You look stressed.
I was stressed. I was stressed. I just spent 5 hours in like stress. Also, the timing, like where this section was really good. You did a great job breaking up the weeks, Amy. I don't know if you had any intention or if it has just worked out that every 100 pages, but this was such a good. It was suspense nonstop. It ended not in a total cliffhanger, but like a little bit. Like,
Yeah. I tried like a little bit with it. Like I really wanted to make sure that if there was any chapters that were like titled the same in both books, that we read them in the same week was my
yeah,
main thing. And then I tried to like have it be a point where it's somewhere in the movie that we could leave off, but I really otherwise didn't. So this was just an especially good week. But
I'm like, I actually feel tired. Like, I think my heart was actually racing. I cried. I really cried. Like, I think 3 times during this section, like tears coming down
yeah.
my face, and not just out of suspense, actually, mostly about Jasper. So we'll get into all that.
Yeah.
But
I know. I definitely forgot some stuff, and you clearly forgot everything almost.
I
So I
knew
can't imagine your level.
nothing. I
Yeah.
knew nothing from this entire section. I did not know one thing, not
Yeah.
one.
That's crazy. That's so crazy.
I literally, my like guess was like, I don't know, they chased her in the woods and somehow she broke a leg or something. Like, I did not remember. And the
Didn't
level,
remember they went to Phoenix or anything.
no, no, I only knew because I think I was talking to my friend Dallas, and she said something about meeting her mom in Phoenix, and that is the only reason I knew they were gonna go to Phoenix. But I thought maybe her mom was coming actually to Forks, so maybe she just said when Edward meets her mom. Anyways, wow,
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a
yeah,
lot of chapters too. There were some
yeah.
shorter chapters, so
Yeah, I was a little intimidated. I read everything today and then I regretted that choice at first when I then looked at how many chapters it was. And I was like, oh, it's not 7 chapters, it's 7 times we're going back and forth. And it
yeah,
was
yeah.
like 12 chapters. And I was a little nervous, but I crushed through it. I think it's the fastest I've read. I don't know if the page number was comparable or not, but I think because my adrenaline was going so much, I was like, didn't get distracted.
Mhm.
Which, okay, so I'll put this caveat out there. So I actually have like kind of struggled reading, doing this tandem read specifically while taking notes because me and Amy both think we have undiagnosed ADHD. I live with and am married to a therapist, so I'm really sure I have undiagnosed ADHD. But I get so and I'm dyslexic. So reading, I feel like reading already, like I have to be so zoned in, or I can get like really distracted. And then we're switching between 2 books and I'm taking notes. So there's just so many opportunities
Yeah.
for me to get lost.
I don't know how you do it all in one day. Like I sometimes do that, but I never do it the day we're recording. And if I do it, like that's my whole day because I constantly have to take breaks because I cannot sit and read anything, no matter how interested in I am. for that long, like without getting distracted.
Oh yeah. Okay, so I do say like people, because I read a lot, and like I think people are under the impression I read a lot because I read fast, which is not true. I just don't care about anything. I won't pee for
Yeah.
10 hours or eat or like when I'm in, it's that like I am so zoned in and nothing nothing can break me to the point like I get mad if like my brother who like lives with me comes downstairs or like my husband will and like say something. I'm like, I'm reading. What are
Yeah.
you doing? Like, anyways, okay, but because of all those things that I said, I feel like I generally then am gravitated towards like more suspenseful. I need a little like faster paced. Otherwise, I can get like really distracted. And I feel like I have been getting distracted a lot during this because of all those reasons I just said. But this chapter had me like gripped so much. But then because of that, I also did not take as many notes because then I was like in it and then I was so in it. And so then a lot of my notes were like, it was the end of the chapter and I was like, oh, just kidding.
Yeah.
I didn't write
I feel
anything.
like I
So yeah.
also took less notes, but for me, less notes is still a fair amount of notes. Some of them I only have like 2 notes for the whole chapter. But
Oh,
uh, there's plenty to talk about. I'm
oh
not
my
concerned about us not having
God.
notes.
No,
So,
I have a million thoughts. And that's
yeah,
also part of where it's better if I've just read it because then it's all in my brain still, you know?
sure, sure.
Okay. I was thinking about if it makes sense for this week for us to do what we did. I liked the flow of last week where we talked about both episodes together, but I feel like there's enough that's different. I don't know if this section makes sense for that. So,
Yeah, well, it looks like there's only 2 chapters that were the same in both books. And it's the first
yeah.
two. So if
Yeah.
we want to do it for the first two, we can.
Yeah.
A lot of
I
the other
mean,
ones have some overlap as to like what's going on, but they're totally different perspectives and different things.
right. Right. And I think that's the other reason I was so gripped in this section is they weren't dialogue just back and forth between Bella and Edward. Those have been the hardest for
Yeah.
me. Yeah, I think it maybe makes more sense to just do chapter by chapter. I also apparently have a lot of notes, so I lied.
Well, I feel like I had more
Oh,
notes at the
man.
beginning, but then as it got later, and I think the later chapters were shorter too, so
Yeah.
we'll wing it. We'll see what happens. But
Vibes only.
yeah. This week we're covering chapters 18 through 23 in Twilight and 22 through 25 in Midnight Sun, and about 20 minutes of the movie. So, yeah.
I'm like breathing heavily. I'm so overwhelmed.
Yeah, drink your non-caffeinated beverage right now, maybe.
Yeah, I had a lot of coffee also while I was just like drinking coffee and reading.
Oh boy.
Insane. Okay.
I did get a text from Callie when she was done reading that just said, I think it was in all caps, oh my God.
I censored it. The original text was not, but then I thought, it's all right, Callie. You don't need to swear this much about Twilight. Okay.
Or you
So,
do, you know?
yeah. Okay. 2 things. So, for the first thing, no, just the main thing. One thing. Forget I said anything. Okay. One thing. My book club sent a reel on Instagram in our little group chat about people discovering that Stephenie Meyer's brother, his name is Jacob. And then somebody stitched that video on TikTok and did a reply talking about all the characters that are named after Stephenie Meyer's family members and how weird it is. Like,
yeah, I just learned the Jacob thing, I think from TikTok like in the last week. But I didn't know other characters.
It was really cute because then I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk about this on the podcast. And then all the girls were like, oh my gosh, we were thinking of you.
Love
So
it.
thank you, book club group. Yeah. Okay, but it was perfect because I think the most shocking reveal, a bunch of her brothers are like different werewolf characters. I'd have to watch it again. I also, because I don't remember clearly a lot of the books, it was hard. Like I think if you know everything, then the TikTok made sense.
Sure.
But because I didn't know all the characters, sometimes it was confusing to me if she was talking about actual, like, that's actually how her brother is, or if she was trying to say that's how the character is, and it's so cringy that she named a character that acted like this after a family member. Okay, but the craziest one, her mother-in-law is Victoria. Like,
Oh my God, that's so bad.
isn't that so bad?
That's so bad. Oh man. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so that's my first note. It was perfectly synced for this. But yeah, I can't get over that. That
Yeah. Wow. Who knew?
cringy,
Crazy.
cringy. I also then was looking through all the comments on that video, and apparently that's like a really like normal thing in Mormon culture, is like you would name your kids like family names, which
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, in part, at first I was like, that's not a Mormon thing, that's a people thing. Uh, but it sounds like it's like more specifically like the combining like Renee and Esme into Renesmee is kind of like anyway, people in the comments were saying that was like kind of a Mormon thing, and that all the characters would be named after her family is very like
Yeah.
Mormon-esque.
Do you think I'm part Mormon with my middle name? My middle name is my parents' name combined.
I think that's so cool, though. I don't know. Whatever. Maybe chat with your mom about it later, I guess. I think you know
Yeah,
if
I'm
you're
sure my mom is Mormon secretly. Sounds right.
not at all. Okay. Yeah, so that's my first note on just a funny light note, which is the end of the funny light notes. From here on out,
Drama, drama, drama.
nonstop. I'm exhausted.
Yeah,
Okay.
we start out with Victoria, James, and Laurent, like, which, and it doesn't slow down, does it? It really doesn't.
No, it does not slow down for this 100 something pages we read.
Yeah,
Not a moment of chill
yeah,
in either book. My
yeah.
first note, though, is with them in the car about Emmett. So I don't know if you have anything about the meeting before then that you want to talk about besides her mother-in-law is named Victoria.
Yeah, just a little something. Did we decide? Are we just doing Twilight, and then we're gonna go to the Midnight Sun perspective of it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I
then
think
I don't have anything really.
okay, great. Because I just realized I have more notes before then for Midnight Sun, but they're all about Jasper. Again, Jasper in this section.
Yeah, I remembered that I love Jasper for some reason. In the movies, he doesn't give a whole lot, and I'm like, when is something gonna happen that I'm like, oh, Jasper's so great because I know it happens.
Yeah, he
Like,
honestly hasn't given a lot, even in the books so far.
yeah,
He's been
yeah,
such a background character.
yeah, and I think it's because he like is keeping his distance or whatever,
Right.
so makes sense. But yeah, this section, oh, my love of Jasper again.
Oh, of all the emotions. Okay. Um, so my first note then for Twilight chapter 18 is okay, in I guess I do have one more funny note, which is that it was like I thought it was so funny how pissed Bella was getting that Emmett is surprised she's smart. Like
Yeah,
I was like cackling a little bit because I would feel the same way. I'd be
yeah.
so pissed. So pissed.
I love the Emmett and Bella interaction in these couple chapters. So
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
So
Which
good.
is also some of the first interaction. She really has not interacted with almost any of the Cullens, but it's really her first time interacting with Emmett.
Yeah.
And the switch that he has then of Emmett's attitude towards Bella is so good. It's like immediate and it is defined. Like it's so good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Uh, on that note, a little bit, what I was thinking of is, of course, we have to make an ACOTAR reference, A Court of Thorns and Roses, because if we didn't, what would this podcast be? Which is, I was thinking it's interesting because you guys obviously know, if you have listened this far, we've made a lot of comparisons to Emmett and Cassian, particularly, being very similar characters. And in this section, I feel like we got that even more. He absolutely was. But a distinct difference being that Rhys, when he is, everyone in the, like, I keep wanting to say the cadre because that's what they, like, the group is called in Throne of Glass. Anyways, but anyone of the Court of Dreams, right? They already knew that Feyre was Rhys's mate, and then he brings her in before she knows to, like, introduce them and start, like, having them all meet and interact, which is very different than how Edward handles this, which is basically like he is in denial himself that he even is interested in her. Like, his sisters have to tell her, and then he, like, keeps her really separated from his family for a long time. And in some ways, it is really different, but obviously, like, the Court of Dreams, Court of Nightmares, like, they are all really dangerous and powerful. It's different because at this point, Feyre, spoilers, is no longer a human.
There's already been so many spoilers of
I hope if you haven't listened or read the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, we've spoiled a lot. So sorry.
Like majority of it.
A lot of the big twists. We could just go through the rest for funsies. Yeah. No, we can't. Okay, anyways. Yeah, really though, even stuff from book 5 we've spoiled. Whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, because if you even mention Nesta and Cassian, that's a big spoiler.
Yeah, it is. In so many ways. Sorry, everyone. Whatever. If you're listening to a podcast at this point, you've already read it or you've decided you're never reading it. So it's fine. Anyways, yeah, I just was thinking about that, like, comparison of these very similar characters in some ways who've approached things kind of radically different. And one of the big things I heard, kind of not in defense of Tamlin as a character necessarily, but a little bit, which is the main difference being, like, Tamlin's response is Feyre is a human who's fragile and can die in so many ways. And Rhys only gets a relationship with her once she's basically immortal and, like, has all this power. Mm-hmm. And being like, yeah, he also doesn't have to be protective of her. And in fact, he gets kind of cringy like Tamlin when, whatever, spoilers again, when she's pregnant then. Like, then he reverts back because then it's like there's something, like, fragile, right? And he kind of goes insane like we've seen Edward go. So it is interesting, just like, people really only know how to make these powerful old dudes as, like, hyper protective. Even Rhys in some ways. Like, anyways, I just was thinking about that in this section and just that comparison and what an interesting, like, trope it is generally. Yeah. So, yeah.
I know. And it's a trope, like, I don't know if I love to hate it or hate to love it.
Same.
I just, like, I want to yell at the character, but I do enjoy reading it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the classic, like, the husband or boyfriend reads that and is like, do you want me to talk to you this way? And she's like, absolutely not. I'd punch you and leave you in a second. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyways, so what a very complicated. Okay, but yeah, then my only other note is just talking about like my last note is finally suspense. Like the
Yeah.
stakes. I feel like Twilight is actually a fairly slow-paced book, and it's kind of set up like a mystery more than a fantasy, and you're really just like teasing out all these things. This section was not. This section was like high action
Yeah.
thriller
You,
fantasy.
you see now what I mean about what I talked about the other week about the climax coming at the end of the book.
Yeah, yeah, insane. Insane. The pacing is dramatically changed. Okay, and there you go. There's literally, I guess I just said every single note I have for 18.
Yeah,
Sorry
I
about
also like have one other note, and it was just about because I've watched the movies more recently quite a few times,
that.
and so I knew that like when they were driving, that Bella was really concerned about Charlie, and at first that is not how it comes across, and at first it talks about how she's concerned about the Cullens, and I was just kind of, I don't know. That's not surprising when you like are reading the book, but I just in my head was like, oh yeah, she's obviously worried about Charlie. I'm like, oh no, that's not what she's worried about right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's worried that Charlie will call the FBI and they'll be all over the Cullens. And I'm like, oh yeah. Then she realizes that Charlie is in danger and is very worried about him. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Once again, her response. I mean, I kind of don't have a problem with Bella's response. Like, I think if she was freaked out about the danger she was in, she obviously shouldn't be with Edward. And if she was freaking out this whole time, like Edward wants her to be, or like is expecting her to be in some ways, want is a complicated thing because he wants
yeah,
it and he doesn't.
yeah,
Um, but I feel like it would make zero sense, and every single reader would be like, well, then leave.
yeah,
That, you know? So I do feel like for her character, it makes sense. She's not worried about herself, you know?
yeah. Oh, I'm not surprised at all she's not worried about herself. Like
Yeah.
that is very
Yeah.
true to her character, both in
Yeah,
the book
it is.
and movies.
Yeah,
So,
it is for
and
sure.
I was surprised at first, though. I'm like, is she not worried about Charlie? But she just hadn't put together that he was in danger. So,
Yeah.
turns
Yeah.
out.
Uh-huh. Okay, I have a lot more notes actually for like a lot of notes for Midnight Sun chapter 22.
I also
Want to
have
jump
much
in?
more notes for that. And I also realized that we didn't really give a synopsis of the chapter. So it's just them at the
Mm-hmm.
baseball field, and Victoria, James, and Laurent arrive, and then they head to Bella's. Him, Edward, Bella, Alice, and Emmett, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's the extent of the chapter. But
Yeah. And the most important part from that being they realize Bella is a human and James makes a move to go run to like kill her
yeah.
and Edward gets in the way and then they like have this like face off of Edward and James and there's this tension and that's all we know at this point in this chapter.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. 22. 22. Why don't you
Question
start
goes
us
on
off?
Jasper.
Yes, me too. My first like 5 notes. Uh
Mhm.
yeah, why don't you start us off since I just like spouted every note I had from last
Yeah.
chapter.
I just was surprised to learn that he was using his power at this time because I feel like I don't know if it comes later in like the original Twilight series or not about more about him using his power. I feel like we don't see
Jasper.
it a lot, or maybe that's just the movies, maybe the books go more into it, but um and I it makes total sense he was using him and was like shielding people so that they weren't as noticeable, and didn't even think about how the others would react to him being like a newborn vampire and being more of a threat and more dangerous because they're mainly focused on Emmett, I think it says. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking about Jasper just to clarify. I think that was clear. But yeah, about Jasper using his powers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought this whole section, him talking about his powers, is so interesting. The first thing I did have a note being like, I thought it was weird when Edward is reading James's mind that he is like, he's missing something from his tally. But even Edward did not realize he was like not thinking about Jasper. Like, Edward doesn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
And Edward doesn't, one, realize that like everyone is being affected by Jasper and doesn't even know what Jasper's powers can do. Like,
Yeah.
this is the first moment Edward is realizing that Jasper has these powers. He obviously knows he can manipulate people's emotions and like feel what they're feeling, but he doesn't realize the extent of it. And that's so interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense since they're not in like confrontations like these and don't experience this kind of thing. Um, yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I also have a note, and maybe this is talked about earlier, but I think it didn't really hit me until Edward was saying, like, it's weird, like, just by looking at Jasper, they should be like very, very intimidated,
Mhm.
like they are by Emmett, because Jasper is covered. He says every inch of his skin is covered in scars. Like,
Yeah.
what? Also, how is he getting through high school? And how,
Yeah.
one, without like people talking about that? And two, like, how is that not mentioned when Bella first sees them?
It's
I
really
know
true.
she's just so stunned by his beauty. Like, I was like, wait, he's covered in scars? Like,
I wonder if he like uses his power on people like so that they don't perceive him as much
yeah,
as something. Or it could just be a plot hole.
yeah.
Either.
Or maybe it's not on his face. Like, maybe it just,
Yeah.
well, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
It might be a plot hole, but you know me, I don't want to believe in plot holes. I always want to defend the author.
I'm with
Um,
you.
yeah, I'm not a good critic. Yeah, anyways, so I thought that was interesting. And then interesting that the emotion he particularly chose was not like soothing necessarily, not just to make everyone calm, but specifically he chose to make it so that people felt so bored when they looked at him, Alice, Esme, and Bella that they just like swept over, to the point that Edward said it was hard to even read any of, like, it was hard to read Alice's mind because his brain said, this is so boring, like, get out of here. Like,
Yeah. Which I do
fascinating.
have questions looping back to this later on. We'll
Yeah,
get there. I won't say
yeah,
anything now. But yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I do also have more like thoughts on this as we get more into Jasper's power later and like some more things. But yeah, mostly I just thought like that moment when you find out that Jasper has intentionally protected, obviously he's protecting Alice, but it extended to Esme and Bella, like that he just instinctively was like, who are kind of our most vulnerable family members, and that just like covered them.
Yeah.
uh yeah, I thought was so like so moving, and Edward feels that way, right? He's like moved by that, how
Mhm.
much Jasper's like doing to impact the family. And then uh the next thing that's so interesting is Edward realizes Jasper is intentionally not doing that around him because he's trying to use Edward's like angst to make Edward seem more intimidating.
So funny.
Also, the descriptions, like when Edward is reading their mind, and that they're all nervous because they're like, what the hell is this vampire that's so twitchy? Like,
Yeah, because he's tapping his foot along with something we didn't
yes,
mention for up her heartbeat.
yes, yes. So interesting. And I thought that was funny because I was like, he's being twitchy. Like, that's
Yeah.
at like the beginning of the chapter. And I was like, what? Like, that seems like a weird rage response.
Is
And
he
then to
really
find
on
out,
heroin now?
yes, And then to find out that he's doing it to like mimic her heartbeat, like to cover up the sound of her beating heart is super interesting. But I just like, I want to be like, yeah, I wish we got more into like Victoria's mind, like to be like, what? Like, we have to get out of here. This like vampire's twitchy. Like,
yeah.
Anyways.
I also had a note for when they like figured out that she was human because there's like a breeze that comes in. And I literally wrote this down as a note, which is so ridiculous. But I'm like, okay, so you know how they get powers based on like what they excel at in their human life? I was like, they should have turned a weatherman. Get someone to control the weather. Literally a thought that crossed my mind.
A weatherman. That's
so stupid.
That's so funny though. That should be what we title the episode. Plot hole, no weatherman vampires. That's pretty wordy. I don't know.
That should be the next sequel.
There we go. Stephanie, we've already given you so many suggestions, but weatherman vampire, that's so dumb.
Oh man.
Oh man. Okay.
I don't have a note. It's echoing. I don't have a note. Testing. Okay, now it's not echoing. That was weird.
Yeah.
My next note isn't until much later on with a vision that Alice has.
Okay, I have some before then.
Okay.
My first one is, so we get in this chapter, Edward is thinking like this hunt that James is going to have against Bella will go on for decades, that James will keep hunting her. Which one, way more creepy and scary, I think, versus like, we just have to like lose him for a weekend. Like, yeah, so interesting to get that. And then that Edward's immediate thought is like, I will protect her for decades. Like, I'm going to do this. This is going to be my life. And I can do this, right? And it's so interesting that his initial response is always, I'm going to isolate myself from my family, and this is my life now. Like, I'm going to flee. This is my life now. I'm not going to put these people in danger. I'll run. I'll do the hard thing. I'll be alone. I'll be isolated. Like, that's so consistently his response throughout this book. And I mean, obviously, we're going to see it in some ways in the next book also. But just that his initial response is always like, I'm going to take it on. I'm going to be the like eternal suffering like person is, I think, like interesting and kind of like, again, like Edward needs some therapy. I don't know.
Yeah. I know. I had a note, I think it was last week's that we read, where he said something about like, you are my life now. And I'm like, I do not like that line. Or maybe it's actually coming up. I don't know. But I'm like, I do not like that line at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Fair. It is true also for him. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm into it, but I'm like, yeah, I'm obsessive. So it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. My note that I had about Alice's vision is kind of around what you're talking about, because they see about how it will be decades, and then the only vision that Alice has where he doesn't continue to follow them is if they turn Bella. And I was just surprised by this because it's not talked about at all in Twilight. And I'm also like, I feel like if I was in Edward's situation, I would at least consider turning her at that point, you know? Like, but he is a couple times where I'm like, you should think about this.
Yeah.
He will turn her. So.
Yeah. And we find out later that definitely would have worked. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. I guess I have another funny note, guys, which is in this section. So now we've got Edward, Bella, Emmett, and Alice all uh in oh no, they're driving. They're driving together. And I just thought it was funny that Edward is like literally in this moment with everything happening, still censoring his comment around Bella's truck not being a good escape vehicle because he's like, she's so sensitive about her truck.
Some of his priorities are just, I feel like, not where they should be, but
no. Yeah, we did have a car talk heavy chapter again, which
I have notes on that, man. I have notes.
Same. I was mad. Okay, great. So we'll talk about that more later because clearly we have thoughts. But I thought that was so funny. Yeah. And then we have, Bella misinterpreting like she says like I'll see you in like a week. And in the Twilight chapter, we think like Edward is grimacing because it's finally a miscommunication trope, but in kind of a everyone's not just believing the worst, And so like then like Bella assumes it's a week or thinks it's going to be a week, sees he's mad, and then is like, okay, or in a few days. But actually it's because Edward is like grimacing because he's like, if only this could be done in a few weeks. Like he's thinking this are like decades.
Yeah.
Like, which
crazy.
At this point, we know he clearly has no intention on turning Bella. So like we know basically he thinks this is the rest of Bella's life.
Mm-hmm.
Like crazy.
Which
crazy.
I feel like you would consider turning her at that point, but I don't know.
Right.
He's very determined that that's not going to happen. So
yeah. Which, yeah, I honestly think is dumb. I thought it was dumb the whole time, but I have chronic pain, so I'm like, whatever, it's pain. She'll be fine. And then so many issues are solved. But obviously there's more. I appreciated Rosalie's perspective. That's like she's also going to miss all these things. It's not just like about a weekend of being in pain.
Yeah, true.
Anyways, yeah, okay. Then, okay, so in this chapter, Midnight Sun 22, we also see, like, from Edward's perspective, kind of like Emmett has like kind of made a shift in attitude. Like Bella said 2 smart things and he's totally changed his opinion on her. And like we see himself, he's literally like censoring his thoughts to not freak out Bella more. And Edward is like, that's so weird. He never would care normally. Like he's really blunt is kind of the idea we get, And so I just love that like he literally was like, oh, smart idea 1. Oh, that's a great point. I agree with Bella again. And then is like, okay, I'm going to be sensitive to now. My role is protect Bella. Done. Like,
I know. I love it so much. I think it's so sweet. And I feel like we get a lot more out of his character in Midnight Sun, like knowing his thoughts and stuff. It makes me because I didn't have, I feel like, much of an impression of Emmett from when I first read the books. And now I'm like, he's one of my favorites. They're all one of my favorites. Who am I kidding?
Yeah. But it's just dumb Rosalie that we don't like.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, my last note is something we have complained about before, which is Edward is like asking Alice, can Jasper handle being alone with Bella? And once again, I will say he's been going to public high school.
Yeah.
For all this time. Like, clearly he can handle it. Like, I don't, whatever. It's just like, yeah, rude. Which again, I feel like we can do, like, first impressions. That's not even a criticism of the writing. Like, I think it's true to Edward's character that he's so paranoid, but I would be so pissed if I was Jasper. Like, to live under that when he clearly has so much power. Again, we're going to get to it later, but yeah, I don't know.
I'm stumbling over my words. I'm curious if Edward like has like a change of what he thinks about Jasper after he sees all of this and like sees what he can do. And yeah, I don't know. I hope he
Yeah,
does.
I feel like he does, like in, again, it's later, but his comment, I think it's when they're driving. Yeah,
Oh,
it
okay.
is. That I like specifically wrote down like a quote from the book because I thought it was like such a clear indicator of Edward's like change of opinion about Jasper. So
I'm sorry, I just laughed because I was gonna ask if it was when he was using him as a rear view mirror. We'll
no,
get there. We'll
I
get there.
do. Oh my gosh. Whoa,
Oh,
this
oh
section,
God, that chapter. Okay.
so much.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah, so that's the end of that section
okay.
for Midnight 22 for me.
Yeah.
I did also think it was interesting that then Alice was like so menacing at the end, like her growling, which came off more intimidating, I think, in Twilight than it did in Midnight Sun. But I thought it was interesting that Edward was like, oh, this will really be to our advantage that everyone always like thinks Alice is weak. And like she's not. She's actually like a strong, scary
Cold
vampire.
as we get to later on. But well, I guess we didn't really cover it in the books, but they show it in the movies, which I don't know. Okay, we'll get there. I
Yeah,
keep
yeah,
jumping ahead.
yeah, yeah. I know.
Uh,
There's so much.
yeah,
Ah,
yeah,
okay.
I know, and we're only two chapters in.
I know. I was
Uh,
gonna say, I feel like this has gone so fast, like we're whipping through, but I'm like, I feel like I'm just talking fast because we already have been recording for like 45 minutes.
yeah.
Anyways, okay. So, yeah, any other things from Midnight Sun, or do we want to jump into Twilight 19?
I'm good to jump into Twilight 19. I didn't have many notes. So 19 is when they go to Charlie and Bella's house, and he has to convince Charlie that she's leaving and get her stuff and go. And my heart just breaks for Charlie. And then we have to read it again in Midnight Sun. And I'm just like, poor Charlie. And then in the movie, when I don't think I've noticed this before in the movie, when she's driving away at the end and he's just frozen in their doorway, standing there, just like, poor Charlie. Oh, so sad.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
It's so sad. Like, oh, I know. It really, it got me. It got me. And specifically, like, we find out in the book that, like, she literally used the exact words that her mom said when her mom left. Like, oh, oh, it was so sad. I was crying.
I was also.
Then we have a radical change of tone in some ways. So then that happens, super sad. They all get in the car or in Bella's truck. Edward and Bella are in her truck. Then we've got Alice following in Emmett's Jeep. Emmett is on foot.
That's Midnight Sun. In Midnight Sun, we learned that she just pushed the Jeep away, like later starts it so that it doesn't make noise. Which I'm like, she's so tiny, but yeah.
Yeah. No, she pushes Bella's truck, right? Not the Jeep.
No, she pushes the Jeep because she pushes it out of the driveway because they are still there, like listening what's going on, and then she pushes the Jeep because they get in the truck.
Okay. I don't know why I thought she like pushed the truck back first. Whatever. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Then my next note is in all caps, which is Emmett jumping in the truck. It scared me so bad. The Midnight Sun perspective is so good from this. Like, I literally have to talk about it now. I can't that like It's literally like, okay, because again, we've talked about how annoying it would be to hang out as Emmett with like Alice and Edward, right? So they're communicating and they're talking about like, where is James and what's he doing? And they're like scouting and communicating and all this. And Emmett does not know what's happening, but he assumes James is watching. And so he's just trying to be as intimidating as possible. So he literally is like, showing physically that he is in between, like James is gonna have to get through him to get to Bella, so he runs on the highway, like I think is what they're on, runs down, jumps into the bed of the truck, like yeah, I just couldn't. Okay. And then Edward then immediately is like putting his hand over Bella's mouth to cover her scream, to tell her like it's Emmett, like it's okay.
Were you worried at all in this moment that it wasn't Emmett, or was it pretty? I had zero memory. Because I knew that happened, but
yeah, so no, I didn't. Yeah. I had no idea. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, no. Hence my notes in all caps freaked me out.
Yeah. Funny. Yeah, I feel like if that wasn't in the movies, I also would have been freaking out, but I knew that happened, so that is something that I like how they didn't capture Bella's surprise good enough in the movie, but
yeah. Mm. Yeah. Okay, so then so they take the truck and the Jeep to the Cullens house, which I was kind of surprised about, honestly. I mean, it made sense once they like were all together, but at first I was like, wait, weren't they like setting a trail and leaving from there? But it made sense how they did it, like in the end. Yeah. But they're kind of coming up with the plan, and I was like kind of like wrecked by what Rosalie said. Like so upsetting. Whoa. Yeah. Okay, I was like, wait, did we find that out in Twilight? But we do. Of like, obviously we get Bella's reaction, but even like in Twilight, you can tell that Edward is like done with Rosalie. Like, where he just like doesn't even respond like to her, like pretty selfish, I mean, in some ways fair, but also like at this point, like that she's just not accepting that Bella is part of their family and viewing her as like this outside inconsequential thing, which I do think is like pretty selfish, obviously, because everyone else has like accepted she's part of the family. Yeah. Anyways, but just like, and Edward's like done. He's like, doesn't even like respond, and it just like moves on and is like, okay, Esme, like, will you do this?
Yeah.
Well, I hope we get a follow-up conversation in our last section next week, or like something, because I kind of feel like we just won't get a lot of resolution of like what happens between Edward and Rosalie. Don't get it in Midnight Sun.
I didn't even think about that. We're gonna stop getting Edward's perspectives.
Yeah, next week.
Bummer. I'm like, I'll be fine not reading like the same perspective or the same chapter from two different perspectives, but like there's definitely moments that are very, very helpful, like to get more background on, and hopefully they do talk.
Also, because New Moon would have actually been such a good one for a dual POV. Yeah. Because so much of the book they're not together. So it wouldn't have been so repetitive, you know?
It's true.
Anyways, it's fine. But yeah, that like wrecked me. It was super upsetting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I just have one more note, which is like the last thing in this chapter. This was a really short chapter. I don't know if you want to jump in with anything or if you have anything.
Well, I just have one note that I think happened. I think it happened right around the same time or right before the stuff with Rosalie, is that I was kind of surprised how quickly Carlisle just agreed to killing this guy. Like, I guess there's no other choice, is like all he says. I mean, like, it doesn't surprise me that he did agree, but it was
Right.
a conclusion he came to very quickly. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Particularly since he's gone this entire time without killing, it is like he accepts it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I do think one thing we haven't really talked about is when they get to the house Laurent, right? That's how we say his name.
Yeah, Laurent.
Yeah, he's at the house with the Cullens. Victoria is not, which confused me a little bit, but I guess she could have left when James did because the three of them would have
Yeah,
gone together.
it talks about how like James and Victoria are kind of, well, that James is the leader of the coven and that Laurent is kind of doesn't really want to be a part of it but is kind of thing. So
No, for sure. I just like in that moment was
yeah.
like, wait, why isn't Victoria there?
Yeah.
Because we find out later. Anyways, but Laurent does say that James is the head of their coven and that like reveals that he's super intense, the most lethal vampire he's ever met in 300 years. He's really dangerous. And then well, we'll talk about it in Midnight Sun when we hear more. But yeah, my final note for Twilight is the next moment I cried in this
I
book
bet it's the same thing I have a note on.
about Jasper.
Yeah.
Like,
I literally have a note here about how I said I remember really liking Jasper from the books, but couldn't remember why. Probably this moment right here.
like so beautiful. So what happens, everyone? Hopefully you've read it, but because it's so good. And like Jasper sees Bella and like can feel all the things she's feeling and knows that she is feeling like, why is everyone doing this for me? Like, I'm not worth this much for everybody to like sacrifice all this. And that Jasper, like, that goes like more unsaid. And that Jasper just says, like, you're worth it. Like, you're worth us doing all of this effort. Like, you're worth it. And just like, I was crying.
I know. I really like the way that it's written too, because like you said, it goes unsaid. Like it's not really hinted at how Bella's feeling in this moment. And so like you don't even necessarily fully pick up on it as a reader until like Jasper says that. And it just like hits deep, man. Ugh.
Oh, it's so it's so good. I kind of wish they would have just ended it there though, because I do feel like what Alice says about like, well, like having to live with Edward for the next 100 years. She doesn't mean it in a bad way or negative way, but I think it's such a beautiful moment with Jasper that then Alice kind of undercuts it a little bit for me. Even though she's adding understanding to being like, no, like you haven't seen what a huge change that Edward has gone through since he met you, and we have seen this. And I think she's saying it to give all of us like some context, right? To like why the family has like jumped on and latched so quickly to Bella and why they've accepted her so much. And I think it's like kind of giving like context to the readers who have not read Midnight Sun, right? Because that came out so much later. But I just think it's so, what Jasper says is so powerful. I almost wish the chapter just ended with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Midnight Sun, chapter 23.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
23. Yeah, I am. So 23 is where I don't know why it's echoing again. Okay, now it's not. Sorry, I'm just reading my notes.
You're fine.
They're wrong.
So it's gonna start at least with the same thing because, you know, obviously we're seeing the like duel. Edward and Bella have been together for this section so far. So we start off with Edward's perspective on the fight with Charlie, and then we get being at the house. My notes pick up once they're at the house. I don't know if you had any more from the scene with Charlie.
Of course, I just have a note about poor Charlie, but I did have a note about let's see, what is Edward talking about here? I think them coming up with a plan as to what they're gonna do. Um, and he talks about having like a strange physical sensation that accompanies the realization that they just have to like go with this plan. It just has to be enough. And that he has like this pit in his stomach, and it says something about how he wonders if it was some long forgotten human response that he never felt in his immortal life because he never had a reason to panic like this. And I just thought it was a really interesting way to talk about it. And I feel like it's partially to like show that, I don't know, we keep getting like him getting compared to like a monster and to show that he is being more human right now. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just thought that
Yeah.
was interesting. And it's something that is brought up definitely again in this chapter. I think in these couple chapters, he talks about it a couple times. But
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's all I
Yeah.
have. Oh, and then I
Mm-hmm.
have the note of Alice pushing the Jeep is just
Oh, yeah.
crazy, but we already talked about that. And how much I like Emmett because it's just great. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So good. Um, yeah, I'm actually surprised I didn't have more notes about Emmett jumping into the truck. I think because I was just so like, what? What happened
Yeah.
in Twilight? Um, yeah.
It does talk about specifically with Emmett when he runs and jumps in the truck how Edward is surprised at his intentions because he thought that he would be like just so focused on catching the tracker, and instead he's like focused on Bella and protecting her. I'm like, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
says specifically about Bella bringing out everyone's protective side, which I feel like you see, and I'm like, I wonder if we'll see what Rosalie's protective side is at some point. I don't know how much you remember about future books, but there's a moment. Okay, we won't talk about it till it
Nope,
happens. Like three
clearly
books.
not. Clearly not. Oh, yeah. I guess actually I do have uh like a fair amount of notes before they get to the house. Actually, I just thought I didn't because my first note is there is so much tension with the fight and the tracker's thoughts, aka James, which I assumed in my head was when Laurent is talking about it, but actually no, it's because in this section was so intense with like you have the fight happening inside. I'm just remembering what my own notes were from like an hour ago, 2 hours ago. Like, yeah, you've got the fight happening inside, and then you've got Edward every moment that he's not listening in on the fight. He's listening for James's thoughts and then communicating with Alice. And like, this was intense. It was
Mm-hmm.
intense. I mean, the book is pretty intense. I mean, this whole section, but here on out, especially, like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. So, uh, yeah. And then I have a note saying, explain that I like fast paced books and how confused you get and you don't like taking notes, which I already did at the beginning. So great. Uh,
I have some notes that kind of happen with random things as he's thinking back about like what happens. And one of them is talking about comparing their coven and the size of it to the obviously smaller covens. And he said something about how they aren't normal for that, and they're also not normal because they're civilized, meaning they don't kill humans, and they live to a higher standard, a gentler, more peaceable standard because of our father. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a straight up cult.
yeah, true.
Which I just made note of because we talked about that Carlisle could be a cult leader in a previous
True. Yeah, we
previous
did.
episode. So
We did.
it just made me laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, despite there being some really tense moments, I did have a couple moments where I laughed. And another one of them was when Edward mentions Mike Newton, who I'm like, I forgot Mike Newton existed. Because he's just like talking about like how they'll potentially go after other people in Forks, and he says he has no love for Mike Newton, but him dying wouldn't be acceptable. Which I'm surprised at because he's talked about killing him a couple times.
Yeah, true.
But
True. He just knows Bella wouldn't be cool with it, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Um, yeah. Okay, before they go into the house, I do have some notes about like, it turns out I do have notes about Emmett jumping into the car, but I think we've kind of covered it. Just it being like so sweet, that transition in their relationship, you know. But I think it's actually super deep what Edward talks about and or what he's thinking about on the way into the house, which is he's kind of wrestling with this idea, like what you just said, like that they're more refined, and is choosing peace weakness. Certainly it's how the other vampires view it, as like a weakness. And I think that's actually like such a deep like idea and like concept to think about. And is that how we perceive like choosing peace as weakness? And I think there's plenty of people who do, and plenty of people who think it takes a lot of strength to not like fight and run into situations. And he basically resolves that like it is kind of like weaker to choose peace in some ways, but that he still would make it because it's the right choice. I just think this is really like pretty deep,
Yeah.
particularly for Twilight, you know, like.
Yeah. I also find it interesting because like I don't view it that way at all. And like I think it shows a lot of strength them picking like the way that they live their life since it's going against what all the other vampires other than the people in Alaska do. So
Totally.
yeah, I don't know.
No,
It's
and
interesting.
I think we're also like, that is very much like our worldview, like that we're kind of united in that for the most part. Is I think we're both people who are like choosing like peace and diplomacy over violence in conflict. I think is just generally where we both align a little more. So that makes sense. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was like a super deep thing that she just like threw in there. And that's part of what I love about fantasy, is this like unintimidating place to have deeper thoughts. I think is when fantasy and fiction generally is really at its best. And like that's the power of like, that's why everyone should keep creating art, and why it's so important in the world is because of things like this. Because in a like vampire romance that the world like makes fun of so much, you can have something as deep as the idea is peace weakness, which is like a deep philosophical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think that's like very powerful and cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
mhm.
Hard to believe a couple of years ago you were only reading nonfiction.
Right. True. All right. Now my notes are actually at the house.
Yeah, I
Anything
actually
more?
don't have a lot of notes at the house, but I've finished my notes for up until then. But I have
Yeah.
some notes
Okay.
on Rosalie.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Actually, I think I only have notes on Rosalie. Yeah, and it's only two notes, and they're very short.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, yeah, so I just have one note before the Rosalie section, which is that I think it's really interesting. Laurent calls both James and Victoria demons. Like he says, like he's thinking in his thoughts, like if only I hadn't met those demons, you know, in like his desperation to separate himself from them now, which I think is really interesting. Obviously, by the end of this section, we see where like that comes from in James, but I don't know if I want you to tell me, but I'm like kind of intrigued that we really have like no information on Victoria, and I'm actually like very intrigued by her. Um Yeah. Yeah, I kind of want to know, like, do we get more about Victoria?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we
Okay,
do.
okay,
Not
great.
for a
Great.
while. Not for quite a while, I don't think.
Well,
Do you want me to say anything about when it is or anything or not? You don't want to hear.
okay, that makes me think it's not going to be next week.
Do you want me to say anything?
I don't know now. I guess.
I'll say something if you want me to say. I want to say something, but I won't say it if you don't want me to.
Okay, just tell me, do we find out in this what book? What book does it come about in? I feel
Um,
like that's some
well,
vague now.
remember when you said you forgot all about Eclipse?
Yeah.
That's when we get it.
Okay, great. Phenomenal. All right. Great, great, great. Cool,
I
cool.
also honestly though, when I was talking, like I would think it was the first podcast we recorded, and I was talking about, do you remember who the antagonist of this like movie or book is? Like, and I was thinking of Victoria, but it definitely is James in this. But I just knew Victoria came at the same time. So yeah.
Interesting. Hmm. All right. Apparently, it's only going to get weirder that her mother-in-law's name is Victoria.
Yeah, I know. That's why I had that shocked about face when you said that it was her mother-in-law's name, because yeah, it gets worse. Like,
All right. Great. I feel like this podcast has almost become like, where there's podcasts where it's like one person is like obsessed with the series and the other person is reading it for the first time.
yeah.
Like, I kind of feel like that's what it's become because I just remember so little about the
Yeah.
plot.
It's also I enjoy it that I don't fully remember everything and then I mostly remember the stuff from the movies because
Yeah.
then it's not like otherwise I would not be able to do this if I knew so much more than you. I'd be like, "Oh, I want to tell you so much." But this I'm like, yeah, I remember Victoria's later on, but I don't remember
Yeah.
tons of details, but
Okay.
yeah.
Great. I feel like that's where, my friend Dallas is. Like, I think it is
Yeah.
torturing her a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, every time I'm like, no, I don't remember, then she just gets quiet. I think it's
Yeah.
her debate on how much she should spoil for me. Anyways,
That's funny.
yeah. Dallas did send another email that we're potentially going to talk about in this episode, but also I feel like we're going to go pretty long. So,
I'll just say the one thing that I wanted to talk about is she asked the question about when we're going to be reading Life and Death. And we're going to read Life and Death at the very end. That's going to be the last one we read. We'll read the what is it called? The short Second Life of Bree Tanner in between Eclipse and Breaking Dawn. And then
mhm.
Life and Death will be last. So
Yeah. And all the other books will obviously be in publishing order.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
So, yeah. Okay. Let's jump into Rosalie.
yeah.
Oh, man. Man, oh, man. I mean, I clearly knew from just the Twilight section that Edward was like done with her. But the extent that he is like, I'm done with her. If she doesn't want to be my sister anymore, that's her choice. And like,
Yeah.
brutal, like just
Yeah.
cut. This is like the
Yeah.
line in the sand for him.
Yeah, that's the first thing I had a note on. And
Oh,
clearly, I just wanted to keep reading because my notes are really short because I just highlighted the line that says, if she decided to see being my sister tonight, that was her choice and I accepted it. And all I said was, damn.
me
My
too.
whole note. Oh, that's too funny.
I literally, it's me writing that, and then it just says "damn" period.
You have to screenshot and send that to me. We're gonna post that.
Great. Oh, that's
That's
so.
hilarious. Because literally, that's exactly what mine says. Just damn.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Wow, that's so funny. Yeah, it was intense. Okay, but my next note then is particularly how he responded with Emmett. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, I'm remembering now. Yeah, I feel like it's like also so intense because like he was not like thrilled about Rosalie bringing Emmett, but he wasn't clearly as against it as like Rosalie has been, but that he like
I'm sorry, I didn't follow. Who's not
oh
thrilled about?
sorry.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so I was catching my own train of thought from my
Okay.
notes. So I think it is I think Edward's harsh reaction towards Rosalie um also I feel like is heightened by how Edward responded when Rosalie brought Emmett home, and that
Oh, okay.
she kind of threw them into this like crisis, and it was like very immediate, no context, and Edward jumped in, and it ended up like connecting them more because Edward was like really supportive and helped in this situation and helped Rosalie. And so the fact that now, obviously, the circumstances are different, but I can empathize with Edward, where now, like, he is in this situation, throwing the family into crisis around his mate, and like that she is like, I'm not helping at all. When like Edward stepping in and like Edward was the one who told Carlisle that Rosalie wanted Carlisle to turn Emmett into a vampire
Yeah.
because like she couldn't communicate clearly, and that like it was because Edward stepped in to help is why they were able to like turn Emmett in time before he died. And so that like she's so unwilling to like help in this at all is like, I don't know, it's kind of fair.
Yeah,
I mean
I
it's
did not even
action.
yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't even think about that from that perspective about how like obviously like you said they are different circumstances, but they're also pretty like similar into that it just like throws the family into chaos and how Edward was really supportive and Rosalie clearly is not.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
No,
And even right like then Carlisle almost like gives her a little like chastise a little bit,
that's
because
my
he
next note.
okay, great. Yeah. When he's talking about like, are you gonna stay with Esme? And it really is all she only does it like what she verbalizes is of course I care about this family. She's trying to like get another jab in at Edward, but like internally, it's only because she's concerned that Emmett is going to be like react really rash and like get really hurt in this situation, which I do think like it's fair, like her concern for Emmett that he's just going to like jump in and like be there with Edward and won't care because you do see like he doesn't really care about the danger. He views himself as kind of indestructible. But it's still pretty cold,
Yeah.
like she literally, like you kind of get the vibe she only cares about Emmett in this
Yeah.
situation.
And it's really messed up when you think about like she's been with these people for it's like 70 years now, isn't it? Isn't that what we learned previously?
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that she just like seemingly doesn't care. I mean, obviously she does to some degree because the whole reason that she was worried about like Bella coming into their family was that it puts them all at risk, but she seems mainly concerned about her and Emmett, and maybe that's
Yeah.
the face that she's putting on slightly, but also her thoughts clearly are also saying
Yeah.
that. But, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And we do know that like she has gone off and just lived with Emmett for
yeah,
times.
yeah,
So she hasn't been spent the whole amount of time with them, but still, yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty cold. I hope in Midnight Sun we get some like something about
yeah,
this
yeah.
because I feel like otherwise in Twilight we're kind of not gonna get this resolution or
No,
like
I also like don't
in,
remember how this book ends. I remember all this happening, and I remember like what happens at the very beginning of the chapters we're reading next week, but I have no idea how it leaves off, even with Twilight. So that'll be interesting.
yeah, I have basically obviously I remembered literally nothing that happened in this section. I have a vague memory of them having like Bella and Edward having a conversation in the hospital. So I know she goes to an
Yeah.
actual hospital.
That's all I remember is her being at the hospital. I don't remember what happens after that.
Yeah. Yeah, me neither. Anywho,
We'll
what a
find out next week.
yeah. Okay.
But back into this week.
Back into this week. Uh do you have any more notes on the situation with Rosalie?
No, I just had a note about how much I love Carlisle because he says to Rosalie, like, will you do the part for our family? And she's like, for Bella? And he's like, yeah, our family, like I said. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
he's
I
over it.
know.
But
Yeah, that's my next note also. Okay, so I have a note about Jasper, and it's Jasper's backstory is so intriguing. I think that is in reference to, oh, it's Edward saying that uh Jasper is like more powerful than like 1,000 vampires, right? I think we looked up the
yeah,
quote.
I have the quote here. Jasper was more lethal than the thousands of vampires who tried to destroy him. That's what it says.
Okay, yeah. So this it just made me so intrigued. Yeah, and I wonder like how much of Jasper's background we're gonna keep getting in like future books and things like that. Because I think Edward's kind of saying he's like the most powerful of their family
Yeah.
in some
I
ways.
I do know we get some of it because I remember some from the movies, but
Okay.
I don't remember how much is in the books or exactly what we learn. But I do
Yeah.
know we get some more. So
Okay. All right. Ugh, man. Okay, my next note is literally cackling because of this like giant body bag duffel bag that they have then filled with baseballs and bats, and then Edward is like intentionally like cradling it as he like walks out to try to convince James that that is Bella in this body bag.
yeah,
Nonsense.
so
Nonsense.
funny.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I think that is my last note for Midnight Sun 23. Do you want to move into chapter 24?
Yeah. So 24 is where Edward, Carlisle, and Emmett get in a car together and drive off. And James follows them, thinking that Bella's with them. And they drive like up way into Canada and then like hop out of the car and go after him, trying to ambush him and get him. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Intense.
yeah,
Every single chapter, I feel like it's intense from here on out.
yeah, yeah. And I
Uh,
think we both said we don't have a ton of notes on this chapter because it was just so much happening, and neither of us have read this perspective ever. So,
yeah,
yeah,
we were both too hooked.
yeah.
Oh,
But
somehow I
it
think we'll.
talks about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I said somehow I still think we'll find plenty to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. It does talk about like how James runs off and dives into like some water, which they're intentionally trying to lead him away from the ocean, but didn't consider the lakes and rivers, apparently. I mean, it's kind of hard to avoid, but
Yeah, yeah, they're in Seattle, or they're not in Seattle. They're in
now they're in Banff, Banff
yeah,
National Park.
yeah. Um, but I think it's the idea because they can like hold their breath like indefinitely.
Yeah,
So then like the ocean he could show up like there's the line like he could show up in Japan or
that's true.
like 20 miles away versus like at least in the lake there's
Yeah,
like a limited amount of spots he can
sure,
come up,
sure.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I do have one note before this, which is that I think it's so funny that Edward is texting instructions to Jasper and Alice to remind them that like humans eat 3 times a day and give her water and make sure she sleeps. Like it's literally like the notes I write my dog sitter. Like it's just like so funny. His like pet human instructions.
Yeah. I
Uh,
also have notes on his texting, but the texting where he decides to get out the phone to text Alice to ask which one of them find the trail to follow James. So it's like, oh, hey, can you look at the future real quick and tell me which one of us is going to figure this out? Like,
Yes, and that becomes like the main strategy for hunting down James is so funny to me. Like, I do wonder in this section, like, how much is James catching on? Because I imagine, I mean, we get later, he talks about, oh, this was so easy, it's almost boring. But like, he clearly, like other vampires, would have gotten lost so many times from his scent, but they like keep being able to like find him again because of Alice. So like, I wonder if he's curious about like the powers or anything.
yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. And just like, I mean, this whole scene, neither of us I know have a ton of notes, but just the entire chase is like, I don't know, it's kind of crazy. Like, both, they just continue, like, they keep following him and they're getting like more and more discouraged, which I kind of like that it's unexpected. You know, like this is the first time in the book that like that James is really outsmarting them. I was not expecting. And not to say like, I mean, Twilight's like a mystery. I think like it's been engaging. Like clearly I've been enjoying it. But these are like the first like real twists where it's like Stephanie Myers is kind of like making the situation worse for like the powerful vampire. She's showing them like weaker, you know, just stuff like that like we haven't seen before and isn't expected.
Yeah.
So yeah, like they're actually so like baffled and he's like really beating them, you know?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it like shows that like Laurent was right about him and about him being like a really powerful vampire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whew. He's creepy. Spooky.
Yeah.
Spooky, spooky. Um, yeah. Okay, my next note is about James going, like the vision of him in the ballet studio. Also, so proud. I immediately was like, oh, it's a ballet studio, which I feel like everyone reading it probably knows that, but I like that it's not obvious to anyone else right away. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I just don't pick up on that for some reason, but
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and all of then my notes around this are like all asking questions. Like he's watching like videos, like what's up with the videos? And just talking about like that really at this point, like it really is like a mystery thriller kind of at this point more than fantasy. I know we've talked like throughout the podcast kind of about the genre of Twilight, mostly in that it just does not fit in your typical fantasy romance, even though I think that's what it probably is categorized under, like a YA fantasy romance.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe paranormal
I think
romance. Probably paranormal romance,
yeah.
right? Which is
Well, I
maybe a,
don't YA, do they even really classify? Well, I don't know. Whatever.
they do at the bookstore I go to.
Yeah.
There's the or the Wi-Fi, the YA fantasy
Okay.
is like its own section,
Yeah.
separate from YA fiction.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's more YA fantasy than like normal fantasy at like most bookstores I go to.
I know. I'm trying to think of like the library. I think the library just has like fiction, YA fiction, but
Yeah, I think anything past like middle grade is all in like adult fiction.
yeah.
There's not like a YA section in most libraries. Some like bigger ones are. They have like a teen section.
Isn't that just the YA fiction?
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like
Oh, okay.
some libraries
Yeah.
have that, but they have to be like bigger libraries, you know?
Sure.
Yeah. Then they make all the adult women feel weird going into the teen section.
I've been there. Now I just have a Kindle.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? I don't go to the library anymore. I just use Libby.
Yep.
Okay. Well, back to this because it's honestly like an intense scene. Guys, I'm sorry. We're just tired now. It's so intense, though. It's so intense.
Yeah.
what's happening in the book. So speaking of, my next note is the end of the chapter, which is that he has her mom.
Yeah. I know. Obviously wasn't surprised. I knew that was going to happen. But yeah, the only other note I just have is about Charlie because they go back to his house and talk about that the sound of the game from the TV isn't there, and he just finds Charlie sitting in his normal spot, just numb and silent. And I'm like, poor Charlie, but
That's just
also poor
hearing.
Renee, poor both of Bella's parents.
I know.
Rough track of
Oh,
them.
so sad. Oh, all the emotions. Speaking of, I don't know if you have anything else you want to talk about in Midnight Sun, but for Twilight, chapter 20, my first note is I'm crying again. Because we open with Jasper talking about Jasper is like understanding Bella's emotion and like speaking into it. And I just was like crying freaking again. And I really realized like that's actually my dream superpower. I always say it's to read minds, but it's Jasper's powers 100%. Like,
It's a good one. It's unique. But
yeah.
like at this moment, I was like a little annoyed with what he was saying because he asked her like, why is she frightened? Because she has nothing to worry about because she's safe. And it's like she has these other people she's worried about who are not safe. But I'm not like mad at him or
No,
anything, but I'm like, obviously there's other things going on too. But
no, I get that. But that's more like I'm more like annoyed. Like, it's just confusing to me that literally all the vampires are like so baffled that humans can like have concern for people outside themselves.
yeah.
Like, and it's literally like Jasper is like actually shocked to realize like she's not concerned about her safety. And that's why she's upset, you know?
Which is
With,
crazy coming from someone whose ability is to pick up on others' emotions, you know?
yeah. Okay, but on that note, maybe he's just so biased because like the most time he's spent with humans since he's had this power has been in a high school where people are like pretty selfish. So maybe he does just think humans only care about themselves because he only hangs out with like 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds, you know?
Yeah, that might do it.
Yeah. Is Jasper in their grade? He's older, right? It's just
Yeah, I
Edward.
think Edward's the youngest. Yeah, I do wonder, are they like all seniors except Edward then? Because he's a junior. Well, no, Emmett's a junior because they're in the same class.
But it's like Spanish, so you don't have
Oh
to be
yeah, I know he is older
in
because they
grade.
talk. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
I think they're all
good
seniors.
question.
Anyways, yeah. What a time. What a time.
We'll
Uh
figure out the next book when it's the next school year.
yeah, true. Are none
Yeah,
of them
some of them graduated and aren't in the high school? I don't remember. We'll
all
find
right.
out.
To be determined.
Yeah.
Um, okay, and then my next and final note for this chapter is Bella asking Alice about becoming a vampire.
Yeah, yeah. And Alice tells her after some convincing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, Bella's like, this isn't because Alice is like, Edward's gonna be so mad. Like he's gonna be livid. And Bella is like, well, like this is just between me and you because we're friends. And it's not even like in the context of the book, it's not even like she sounds manipulative about it. Like it literally is her being like assuming they're already such close friends in the same way that Alice acts, which I thought was interesting. Like both of them have accepted the inevitability that they're best friends, so they both are acting like they're best friends.
Yeah,
It's like so weird.
yeah,
Like only Bella and Alice could do that.
yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any other notes on this chapter. We're ready to move into the next one.
Yeah. 21. Ah! Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Start us off. So intense.
Well, the first note I have, I feel like your notes might be better for this. Yeah, because I don't
Oh,
even make the phone call because I knew that was coming. So,
okay.
and
Okay.
the chapter
Never mind.
is literally
My
called
notes.
phone call.
My
So let's go to
notes.
your notes.
Okay, great. First, her house.
Yeah.
It's her house. It's so dramatic. Ah, okay. It's so funny because I feel like this has basically become like the trope of like one person like has not read the story at all and one person knows because you know everything and I have forgotten everything. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, I don't know
Okay.
everything. There is some stuff coming that I did not remember at all, but no,
Uh,
no more than you.
yeah, yeah. Okay, the next note, which is kind of just what we were talking about with Jasper, is that this is the first point that Bella evades Jasper's power. Like Jasper is like forcefully trying to calm her down pretty like heavily, and she's able to like shove it away. And so I just wonder, like, I wish we had a Jasper POV in this moment because it's like literally like I wonder if he's shocked, you know?
Yeah. I was wondering if you remembered what her power was or not, because I was going to say something, but wasn't sure if you knew. So I wasn't
Yes.
going to say anything unless you said something.
Yes, my friend Dallas did tell me.
Ah,
So I did not remember. And then she made a comment about it. And then I remembered that, oh,
got
yeah, that is her power. Yeah. But I'm glad because, like, this section, I would not have made a note about this
yeah,
normally, probably. But then it felt so impactful as, like, effectively as a reread because like then I was like, oh my gosh, like this ties in, this is so cool. And I just love when it's clear authors had like a plan from the beginning. Like this scene means that Stephanie Myers knew what Bella's power was going to be already, you know, which is just cool, like 4 books later.
yeah.
So yeah. Okay. I just remembered we're just going over my notes. Which my next note, great, is he has her mom. It's like all I don't know if you can see all
Yeah.
so I can't whatever. I'm
I saw it
sorry.
for a second there, but
Yeah, it's just all caps. I was freaking out. I did not see this coming. It was so intense. Like ah! Oh my god.
yeah, it's
Okay,
funny. You have more notes on this because I'm like, just nothing surprised me about it.
great,
I'm
great.
like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, I
I
remember this.
I was shocked. I was shocked.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, but then my next note is a critique. You know how I feel about these critiques, but I'm like, why did she not tell Alice? Like, I'm curious your thoughts, Amy. Were you like annoyed or like did you think it was weird she didn't talk to Alice or did you think that was like made sense for her?
I mean, I wasn't that surprised. If I were in her situation, I maybe would have said something. I don't know, but um, like I think at that point she had already decided what she was gonna do. Like it says like that she's planning to go to the mirrored room and that she's going to die. And it's actually back at like it's the first line of the book, like in the preface that talks about that she had never given much thought about how she would die. And then she goes on to say surely it was a good way to die in the place of someone else, someone I loved, which is like referencing this moment where she decides that she's going to die for her mom, you know? So,
Yeah.
like, I feel like she knew that she was going to do that. And if she told Alice about it, like, Alice would not let her go, you know?
I mean, I guess I just think Alice is the most like swayable of all of them. And I don't mean to say that Alice can be manipulated. I just think Alice can look at like all the options
Sure. Yeah.
and like just like it kind of then can accept like this is the best this is the best thing or the best move, you know? And I guess if she just kept seeing Bella die, maybe she wouldn't have let her go. I don't know. I just thought she could talk to Alice and like convince it, and she could have had like a smarter strategy going in.
I think you're right that she could have, and like that Alice would probably come to some better decision, but like she's like not thinking logically in this moment. She's just thinking, "Oh, my mom's gonna die. I'm not gonna let that
Yeah.
happen."
Yeah. And I mean, James threatened that he would like know if they were involved. But also I'm like,
It was just if they came with, I think,
oh,
wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what it was. I could be wrong though, but
okay. Yeah, because he tells her not to tell them and that
oh yeah, he does, doesn't he?
they would come with maybe. Anyways, whatever. Yeah, so that was kind of that. And then I end the chapter once again crying in tears, start and end of this chapter in actual tears. Ugh, the intensity. This is all just so intense. And the letter to Edward, like it got me. I was like crying. It wasn't even like, I was like, why are you crying about this? But also, I don't know, just like
And
self.
you read this all in one day.
I know. I read all of this and then we recorded. It's been a day, guys. It's been a
Yeah.
day of Twilight emotions. So yeah, it was just intense and something about just like the self-sacrifice in like true love. I don't just gets me. Just gets me. Ugh. Okay. Ugh. Okay, wait. Did you have any notes on 21?
I did not have much. We covered anything that I had notes on. So,
Okay, great. I just was going to jump into 22 and then I was like, wait, I literally just read my notes.
no.
Okay, wait. 22, I have to let you guys know. So, 22, I realize I have a lot of notes. I'll have to like self-edit a lot of these out because they're just not applicable because in my mind, I went okay, so Bella gets done with the phone call. She comes out. Alice is sitting in the like main room and she's like glazed over in like a concerned like trance and she doesn't snap out of it until Jasper's back. And she like says Bella while she's in this and then she snaps out of it and kind of like acts like she's fine and like moves on. Okay, so my assumption when I read this was and again, the last chapter ended. I'm like, why is she not talking to Alice about it? And so then in this next chapter, my assumption reading this scene is, oh, she doesn't have to. Alice knows. And now Alice is pretending like everything's fine for Jasper. Like now she's trying to convince Jasper that it's okay because she has agreed that Bella's plan is right, but she's like grieving it already that it's so sad. This is like the best option that Bella goes. And so I have all these notes about like, oh, Alice is like confused when she wants Jasper to take her to get coffee because Alice is like wants to help her escape or like what like this whole time I think Alice is like on her side plotting with her, which is false.
Yeah.
And you discover it in the next chapter, but I feel like flow wise, I'm just going to talk about it now, which is that actually what has happened is kind of the opposite. Like it's this vision, and we're kind of led to believe that maybe like Alice saw the murder. She does not connect it to anything else. Like she doesn't connect it to an action Bella is going to take because there's so much happening. She doesn't realize it's like imminent, like about to happen, like the actions or anything like that. And so instead, she like sees this possibility of a murder, and then she's trying to stay calm to not freak out Bella, not to not freak out Jasper, so they can like conspire together, you know?
Okay.
Anyways, so I just have a lot of notes being like, oh, Alice is in on it.
Yeah.
False. All of
She's
them are false. She's not.
yeah. Okay.
Uh, yeah. Anyways, but I just thought that was like so interesting. And then I also just have like a lot of notes on mostly me being like, I literally remember none of this. I did not
Yeah.
remember one thing from this entire section. The suspense was eating me alive. It's been an intense day, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot that happens in this section for sure. Definitely the most action packed.
Insane,
Yeah.
insane amounts. Oh, okay.
My next note was just that so they go to the airport and that's where Bella like runs off. And I just found it hard to believe that she would be able to like get away from them, but I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I do think it is somewhat unlikely, right? Like in some ways. But to me, I think it's like more suspicious that she was able. Well, no, forget actually. I'm self correcting before I've even talked. Okay, I think it actually makes sense that she kind of can because previously, like, I was kind of on the same page, but we get some clarification later in the book, like in this section, which is I thought all the vampires could like run so fast that humans can't see them, like Edward does when he goes and saves Bella from the car crash. But we find out later, like in this next chapter, that that's like not true. And actually, Edward can run faster than all of them. And so, like, they can't, they're like not able to run that fast. And
Yeah.
so it would like cause this big scene in the airport, which I kind of think you cause a scene if you're running past like TSA in any airport as a human, you cause a scene, you know, like it's not good. So yeah, I don't know. I think it was like somewhat plausible.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, it was just, I don't know. She did have a plan, I guess, and like it worked out that she was able to escape away without like them knowing at first. So she does have that extra time, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, my next note isn't until they're at the ballet studio. So,
Yeah, mine too. Which
okay.
first note is it's a video.
Yes. Yeah. Big reveal if you don't see it coming.
Such a good twist. Again, it was a good twist. I did not think it was coming.
Yeah.
And then we follow that up immediately with a huge reveal at the end of this chapter, which is Alice.
Yeah. This is the part I did not remember. So when you texted me like, "Oh my God," in all caps, I thought like this was my "Oh my God" moment. The rest I remembered. So this though, no memory of this.
Yes. So we find out Alice is the only person that has ever, in all his 300 years being like a tracker hunter, there's only one person who has ever gotten away from him, and it is Alice.
Yeah.
Crazy. And it's because she was in an insane asylum, and like someone on the inside, like, let her go and then knew that he was going to hunt her. So that person like turned her into a vampire. And then James ends up killing him, whoever turned Alice. So there's still a lot that's like sketchy. Like a vampire was working at an insane asylum. Is that what we're led to believe?
Well,
I
it also it does say I just have to reread this because I had to reread this a couple times as I was reading it first because I was like, wait, did James turn her? And I'm like, no, James did not turn her.
no.
But okay, so James is saying you see the vampire who was so stupidly fond of this little victim, the little victim being Alice,
Yeah.
make a choice that your Edward was too weak to make, meaning turning her a vampire. When the old one knew I was after his little friend, he stole her from the asylum where he worked. I never will understand the obsession some vampires seem to form with your humans. So was this guy like in love with her then? That's the kind of impression that I got. But
I mean, it says fond of her. See,
Yeah. Or
I
I guess it
why,
could just be friendship, yeah.
yeah, but I'm like, why? Why is he working? Why is a vampire working at an insane asylum?
Dude's gotta work.
Only Carlisle works.
Yeah. That's, that's a very good point.
Of all
Carlisle's
the
the only one
vampires
who
we know,
works. Yeah, I
yes,
never really thought that much about that. How do they
all
have
of
so
the
much money?
vampires.
Oh, that we got into before. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's in our
Oh,
boss
yeah,
episode that we talk about. Yeah.
yeah. Oh my
Anyway,
god.
yeah, good question. Don't know why vampires working at an insane asylum, but
Yeah. Okay, but I hope that everyone listening who knew this was coming has been enjoying us being like, we want Alice's backstory. Why doesn't she remember anything? Well, now we know because she was
yeah,
getting electroshock every day because it was the 20s and she was like a prophetic human.
yeah.
Insane.
It turns out we knew her backstory the whole time because we read this 16 years ago and just didn't remember it.
Literally. Oh, yeah, that was another huge twist. This is like back-to-back twists. I was reeling. Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh. Okay, and then
Okay, but wait, I have a question here about how did Edward not pick up on this? Like, because, or was it
yeah,
because Jasper was shielding her, like when they were in the clearing with the baseball and all that? Like,
yeah. Okay, that's here's what I think is that so it mentions that he right away noticed Alice in the clearing. So I think one, you have Edward is searching all their minds. It's not like in the scene once once James is obsessed with Bella and Edward is like laser focused on his thoughts. It's before then.
yeah,
And then he says it's like a passing notice, which I think is actually like so lucky that for James that for James, yeah, whatever. Anyways, like I think that Jasper was making them bored instead of
yeah,
like calmness, which we talked about earlier, and being like, if he was calm, he would have kept dwelling on it. But
yeah,
instead, he like looked at Alice and then he felt so like bored that, like, oh, yeah, that's like a vampire that got away from me, whatever. Because it says even Edward was like so bored, even trying to like read her mind. He had to like fight it, you
yeah,
know? So I think that's why we like don't know because it was just so fleeting for him in that moment.
yeah. It's guess it's just like crazy, like the amount of interest that he has in Bella to not like think about that at all. Like obviously there's Jasper
Yeah.
controlling the situation some, but like for it to be the one person who has gotten away from you, like, but
Yeah, I do think that's crazy. And it is like such a like kind of like crazy moment where he is like, well, that's like the compromise. It's the one for one. Like the Cullens will get to keep one of the ones who got away, and I'll get Bella from them, you know?
I also am curious, like going forward, since I don't remember this at all, does Bella tell Alice this then? Like, are we gonna get that?
Oh, yeah.
Because
I
she
didn't even
doesn't
think
know.
about that.
Yeah,
I hope so.
yeah. I would assume she would. I
Yeah,
just,
why would she not?
yeah,
Yeah. Weird,
yeah.
weird, weird. Uh, okay. Are we ready for Midnight Sun 25?
The craziest chapter ever. Yes. Oh my gosh. I just
It's
like this, it's
yeah,
so ridiculous. It's so much about cars and just takes you out of it. I just
it's
glad
yeah,
it's them, you know?
yeah. No, it's ridiculous.
Okay, so I don't have a note until Edward's using Emmett and Jasper as his rearview mirrors. which we already got.
Okay.
But it's just so funny.
So ridiculous. I do have two notes before then, but like, it's so funny. Like, oh my gosh. Okay, well, my first note we've kind of addressed, which is this is the point where I realized I was wrong about like my interpretation of Alice's vision at this point. So that's my first note, is correcting myself, saying half your notes are invalid from the last chapter. Okay, and the next one is this is how little I know about cars and tells you how much I was pulled out of like the book here in this super intense scene. I've been like on the edge of my seat, and then all of a sudden we're talking about all these details about cars after car after car and the specs and how fast they can drive and how much weight they can hold and all this nonsense. And then we get to the point where Edward realizes there's a car with Nas and like nitrous in this garage, and that's the car they're gonna take. And my note is that's a real thing. I literally thought they made that up for the Fast and Furious franchise. Like,
Yeah, no, honestly, same. Like, I had no idea because it's like something you see reference, like where people are like, "Oh, hit the NOS," and it's like, yeah, that's not a thing, but it's just like in fancy cars or something. So yeah,
yeah, okay, because they make that joke in The Office.
yeah,
Me and Amy are both avid Office watchers.
yeah. Oh yeah, and
And
then he flips on the like windshield wipers.
okay, but I thought they were making a joke referencing the Fast and the Furious franchise. I didn't think it was funny because, like, it's so clearly not a fancy car. I thought it was
Yeah,
funny because it's not a real thing.
yeah, yeah. I don't really know, but yeah, I just yeah,
Yeah, no, and so then I'm like, wait, is this a real thing? Wait, but no, this is a fantasy book we're reading. But why would she make up that and put this
yeah,
part of
yeah.
the fantasy
That'd be a
world?
little
Like,
weird.
I think it's
I
a real thing.
I
Anyways,
also did look up and figured out that apparently Stephanie Myers does not know much about cars, but her brothers know a lot. So she like got all the information about cars from her brothers. So,
great.
yeah,
Her
yeah,
brothers, Jacob and Paul,
yeah.
and
Whatever
whatever other
characters they are.
ones.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh, yeah.
this whole chapter, man, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Well, so my next note is Edward using Emmett and Jasper as rearview mirrors, which is one so
Iconic.
iconic, truly. Okay, but two, I'm like, did Edward just unlock a new level of like his powers for this? Has he already had these level of powers? Because seemingly in this scene, he is simultaneously seeing through the eyes of Emmett, Jasper, Alice, and himself. Although I guess technically he doesn't need his own eyes, I guess. But like, and they're on different
Driving
time.
like 150 miles per hour. He probably needs his own eyes.
I don't know. But like, okay, and then one of them is what, 30 seconds, 50 seconds in the future? I think it's 30 seconds, right?
I don't know exactly. Yeah.
Something like that. Anyways, it's like under a minute in
Yeah.
the future. And then one of them are happening in that moment,
Yeah.
which also is crazy. So then moving forward, he's 30 seconds ahead, but his like side mirrors are like in the present time, which is a different time frame than his front vision. Like
I
this is
just love that you just referred to Emmett and Jasper as his side mirrors.
I mean, functionally, the side mirror view.
I know.
I just think it's literally crazy. And like the only way I can make sense of it is like the 3-player like video game screen split.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
funny.
yeah. So intense. This whole section is just
Yeah.
like, yeah.
My next note that I have is about how insane it is about Carlisle, just like when they do that, have that person that rear ends them, and he gets out of the car and just like injects her so she like passes out. I'm like, Carlisle, that is
Yeah,
so not you.
it's okay, but it is in that like they didn't have
It
to
is,
kill her or like, it
and
was
it
the
isn't
simplest.
harming her like
Yeah,
long term. But yeah,
yeah.
I just
Okay, so now we're finally jumping into the line I have been referencing this entire time, which in this moment in the car, in the midst of all this nonsense, Edward says about Jasper, he says, as a man of peace, Jasper struggled, but as a man of war, he is more than I ever imagined. And so this is where I think he actually is switching his perspective. And then he talks about, I thought this was so cool that Jasper is like, tell me if this was your read on it. I kind of felt like Jasper was almost uniting, like, not just their emotions, but almost their like mind, like they're moving as a unit, like things like that. So I don't know if it's just like he's controlling their emotions so much, but like you get this idea that he's so much calmer than the rest of them because he's so good like under pressure. And then it's like he's practiced using his powers to manipulate like a military unit for so much in his past that he can do it to the point of like having them move in one, like
yeah.
crazy,
Yeah,
crazy.
he even says like verbatim, like he says Jasper kept me from steering off the road, and he says something about I let Jasper keep me focused. I really didn't take notes on this, I think just because I was wanting to know what happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't take a lot of notes on that, but
Yeah.
good good points.
Yeah, I thought this was so interesting. And then Jasper at one point, like, so then it gets pretty intense in here because Alice's visions keep jumping to what's happening with Bella, which is getting progressively more and more freaked out. And then at one point, Alice's visions jump to Edward trying to commit suicide, like later after like Bella has died and Edward is trying to think of how to end his life. And at this point, Jasper reaches out and touches Edward to like calm him even further. And he talks about it working like Novocaine for his like whole emotional state, which
Yeah.
I think is interesting. And this is the second time we get reference that or Jasper touching someone makes his powers even stronger.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I I just picked up as you were saying that I didn't pick up when we were reading that that was Alice's vision of him like thinking of ways to kill
Oh,
him.
yeah.
But now that I am like rereading that section, I'm like, oh yeah, that is maybe what happened.
Oh, do you think it's not that? Do you think he's
Yeah,
just
because
imagining it?
well, I'm not exactly sure. Because it says about like this is a little graphic, but it talks about Bella crossing the pine floorboards and the tracker like raising his foot. I guess it's not that graphic, but and it says that Alice refocused, but his mind veered for a tenth of a second. He was back and forth back
Okay.
in his Volvo and fork. So I think it was him like flashing back to when he was thinking about it and him thinking about it again. But it could be interpreted either way. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then Jasper, the Novocaine thing is pretty crazy. I highlighted that, but I didn't have any like comment on it. I just because I just wanted to keep reading. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Jasper's powers are pretty crazy, and I kind of forgot that there was the line about him like being so good in war, and I think that really is like a turning point for him having more respect for Jasper. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then do we read Twilight 23 and then Midnight Sun 25? Is this no, this is Midnight Sun 25. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we're on 25 right now, and then we read 23. Also, we did get past this point, but I have to say about Carlisle and when they get out of the car to like the other car, and that he goes up to the
Oh yeah,
driver who's rear-ended them and like gives her some drugs so she collapses, and I'm like, that is insane. So unhinged.
I did think a lot about the police officers making a report for this. Like a
Yeah.
woman was drugged outside a car that, like, a carjacking. At first, they just think it's like some like punk with like their tricked out car going super fast. That's why the police start pursuing them, right? And then it becomes like a carjacking where they switch vehicles, and then the woman is drugged and they take her vehicle, and then they're gonna find it with no rear view mirrors, all banged up outside a ballet studio that's gonna get, I think the implicate, are they burning it? Is that the implication? The smell of gasoline? We'll get to that
Well, yeah. Okay,
next
we'll talk
in
about
the
that later.
next chapter. Anyway, but just like, and if they don't, like the blood, like insane for the police.
Yeah, this whole chapter is just so unhinged, and I
Yeah.
kind of love it, but I also definitely hated it in the moment. But
Oh,
it's
so
crazy.
so intense. Yeah, and we kind of don't get a ton, like they get to the place is kind of where the chapter ends. Uh and my last note is like, this would have been an insane place to stop. I'm so glad we got one more chapter of Twilight.
Yeah, it would have been for sure. I also like if I had known exactly how these chapters go, because like I said, I only like based them if they like had them in the same section if they had the same name of the chapter. But had I known that this ended and we didn't get the perspective of Edward from the ballet studio, I would have changed that because I'm like, I want to read that, but so we'll
Yeah.
get that next week. But
Yeah. Oh. And then we jump into then it's Twilight for our the final chapter.
yes.
Um,
I
we get a fair amount of Edward's perspective also in this, right?
uh
Some,
yeah,
maybe not that much.
I feel like we don't get like a super clear idea of what's going on because Bella is like partially unconscious
Yeah, yeah.
and
I
thinks she
literally,
whatnot, the
yeah,
you.
yeah, the huge. I literally took zero notes on this chapter. I've just realized because I was so intensely reading, and then I ended, texted you, and I think just like toss the books.
Yeah. I only have two notes. My first one is in all caps and is Alice trying to tell Edward to change her, and he says no. And I said, why the fuck would you disagree in this moment? She is literally about to die, you fuckhead. Those were my exact words.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, it's overtly dumb. He does, like, this is the one situation that, like, it makes sense. This is the only time Carlisle would have been okay, is like when the person is like basically gonna die.
Yeah.
Which I get, like, it's kind of not what's happening here, but Edward kind of doesn't know that yet. It's not
Yeah.
Carlisle saying
Yeah.
she's gonna die. Like,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It just, yeah, it felt like a dumb time to be like, no,
Principled about it.
yeah, like, I don't know.
I,
Plus, like, it's not you turning her, which felt like less guilt, maybe. I don't know. I don't know.
my only other note that I have is when Carl Car Carl Carlisle and Edward are talking, and Carlisle says that it's Edward's decision and that he has to get the bleeding stopped, so he can't do it. And I made a note here. I just was so anti-Edward this chapter. I'm like, Bet Edward was wishing he put those 2 medical degrees to some practical use, because then he could stop the bleeding, and Carlisle could change her. But
That's so funny. Mm.
but going back to your point, what you mentioned earlier about the gasoline. Did you watch the movie or no?
No,
Okay,
I
I
didn't
feel
this
like
week.
just because it's more clear in the section of the movies that there was that the smell of gasoline is a fire they are lighting to burn James's body.
Oh, got you. That makes sense. Yeah, yeah. No, it was too intense. And then I had enough time even to watch this clip, but I was just reeling. I was
Yeah.
like, I can't be in this much
Yeah.
anymore.
Obviously the book is a lot more. The thing that they don't have in let me look at my notes for the movie to see if there's anything more of note, but they don't have them go to the airport at all, which I'm like is kind of significant. She just like runs off from the hotel
Okay.
and yeah, and actually in the movie like um Edward and the rest of the Cullens aren't even like flying to Phoenix, or at least they don't show that. And in my mind, it seems that they're coming all the way from Forks, because then Edward shows up by himself because he's the fastest
Okay.
in the movie. So that's a little different. But
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it
also,
makes sense they didn't want to pay for filming an
yeah,
airport scene, you know?
there was a pretty funny moment, in my opinion, in the movies that I just could not get past. And I think I didn't like pay that close attention when I watched it recently because I didn't remember this. But as Bella gets to the ballet studio, we see her pepper spray, which is referenced earlier in the movie when she goes on the baseball date
Yeah.
with Edward. So she pulls it out and I'm like, what are you gonna do with that against a vampire? But she actually does spray James with the pepper spray, and of course,
Oh, really?
it's like that's insane that they decided to include that.
I have
Like,
to watch it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty funny. But and
Yeah.
then, oh yeah, and then, well, I don't know if I should say this because it might be in the Midnight Sun chapter. I'll say it because that's what we had on our thing, and people that watched it
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
It shows Alice ripping James' head off and
Ah,
throwing it into the fire.
okay.
I just was like, yeah, very,
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
yeah.
Like,
So that might happen in Midnight Sun because we haven't got that. Because I think the whole thing is like, I'm pretty sure when like she wakes up at the hospital, like she doesn't fully recall what happened or something.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll
I'm
see.
sure we get it. We
Yeah, yeah,
we must in Midnight Sun. Hmm.
yeah. So
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, all of this was pretty intense. I mean, just yeah, I don't know. The whole freaking section is crazy. Uh yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm curious, do you get the impression that like James like bit her to kill her, like to paralyze her as he's killing her, but then they come and interrupt him? Or is it like this final, because it seems weird that he would like try, like this is kind of the only way to save her from dying. So it seems weird, and he wouldn't have enough context to know this would like piss off Edward that much to like turn her into a vampire. So is the intention that like he's bit her to like keep her kind of like numb and frozen, you know? Like Alice talks about like earlier, and like then gets interrupted and has to like flee.
Um, yeah, I think that is what happens because like it talks about that how he has to like bite her now because of like the smell of her blood and stuff. So I'm sure he does
Yeah.
assume in those moments to kill her, and then it cuts to them all being there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That was my assumption. I was just making sure we're on the same page there. Um, yeah. Edward is able to like suck the venom out of her, which is kind of crazy. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about like if that should have worked, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Like,
Because I
and
feel
yeah,
like probably not the way that blood circulates, that you would not be able to get all of that out without
he would
fully
have,
draining her of blood. Like,
yeah, which I don't know. I don't know that that like makes sense. I get the books would be like you would miss a whole couple books if she became a vampire in this part,
yeah.
but still I was like I felt mixed about that. Like I felt like they should have let her become a vampire at this point.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyways, I don't have any I didn't write anything because I was just reading so much, I guess. I didn't remember that I didn't write notes until I just looked down and was like, "Oh, nothing. You wrote nothing in this chapter." Cool.
Yeah. And I literally read my two notes that I had being mad at Edward. So
Yeah. Yeah, so friggin' intense. This whole chapter or this whole section was so intense. And next week is our last week for Twilight Midnight Sun tandem read. It feels like it's gone kind of fast. I guess it's been
simultaneously has gone fast and slow. Like it's
I mean
been
I guess
almost 2 months.
9 weeks.
Like
Yeah. Crazy. Crazy. Yeah, so for everyone to know, next week, next Tuesday, we will publish the final episode of the tandem read. Then we are going to take a week off, and then we're going to jump into New Moon. Maybe we'll talk next week because next week's chapters are shorter, right? Like it's
I
not
don't think
100
they're
pages.
much shorter because it adjusted from that time that I accidentally didn't read all the chapters.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it still might be a little bit shorter, but not much.
Okay. Well, I guess we can just talk about it now then briefly, but for New Moon, since we're not going to have a tandem read, we are going to have like an additional segment. So it'll be me and Amy. We'll chat about the book just like we have for all the previous ones, but we are also going to have my brother is going to come in blind. He has not read Twilight, has very little knowledge about the franchise, and he is going to try to figure out and see how much he can understand from New Moon. His favorite trope in fiction is when you get dropped in like mid-plot to a story and then have to figure it out. So he is self-imposing that trope onto the Twilight franchise. So
I did enjoy when we were talking about this with him that one of the very, very few things that he knew about Twilight was that, and this is specifically from the movies and not the books, about how they had all of the grad caps on the wall. Like, how do you know that of everything you could know from Twilight?
He's such a nerd that's what he would remember, you know?
Yeah, I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, so cute. Yeah, so that'll be that, and it'll be really interesting to have none of this context and then have Jacob be such a prominent character. So yeah, my brother's name is also Jacob, and I've just realized that might get confusing.
That's good.
Oh well,
Taylor Lautner. It'll be Taylor now.
Yeah. So funny. Yeah, holy smokes. I'm like, I might have to take a shower. Like, I was sweating heavily.
Oh, too funny.
Yeah, I think
Clearly we had some feelings this week because this has to be our longest episode.
I think so. I think so. Crazy.
Well over 2 hours.
Yeah. As always, guys, please, share this with a friend who also is down to listen to a 2-hour long episode
about an eighth of the Book of Twilight.
Yeah. So,
remember before we recorded our first podcast and you thought it was only going to be like 20 minutes long per episode?
Yeah, I did. I thought it was going to be under 40 minutes for
Yeah,
every episode. Literally not once. So funny.
not even close.
No. Yeah. So anyways, please share with someone, like the Instagram, subscribe to the YouTube, follow us on TikTok, all the things, guys, all the things that internet people say, insert here. Please do that. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to this intense rant. I can't even say anything else. I feel exhausted.
I mean, that's good because we're done.
Great. All right, everyone. Bye.
Thanks everybody for listening.